I couldn't believe my eyes when I walked through the front door of my own home after our honeymoon. There, lounging on the sofa like they owned the place, were Doug's ex-wife Linda and their daughter Kristen. "What are you two doing here?" I demanded, my heart pounding. This was supposed to be the start of our new life together. Linda looked up from her magazine, her expression as cold as ice. "Hello, dear. Doug said we could stay for a while." Kristen didn't even bother looking up from her phone. "Yeah, he gave us keys and everything." I whirled around to face Doug, who had just entered from the kitchen. "Is this true? You let them move in without even asking me?" He had the decency to look sheepish. "Marianne, they needed a place to stay for a little bit. I didn't think you'd mind." "Not mind?" I sputtered. "This is our home, Doug, the home we're supposed to be starting our marriage in. Just the two of us." Linda skied loudly. "Don't be so dramatic. It's just temporary until Kristen and I get back on our feet." "You've been on your feet for 30 years, I shot back. "I'm not having house guests, especially not ones who treat me like an intruder." Doug tried to placate me. Now, let's not fight in front of the ladies. We'll work something out." But I could see it in his eyes. He had no intention of making them leave. This was my life now, an endless hostage situation with his insufferable former family. Kristen finally looked up, smirking at me. "If you can't handle a little company, maybe you shouldn't have married Dad." The cruel jab stung, but I refused to show weakness in front of her. Squaring my shoulders, I said evenly, "You're right, Kristen, which is why I'm leaving until they're gone for good." "Marianne," Doug protested, finally showing a flicker of concern. But I was already heading for the stairs to pack a bag. As I threw clothes into a suitcase, I could hear Linda's shrill laughter floating up from below. "I told you she was too high-strung for you, Doug. This marriage won't last." Tears pricked my eyes, but I blinked them away fiercely. After everything I'd been through in my life, I wouldn't let them see me crumble. I was Marianne Stevens, and for the first time in decades, I was putting myself first. I stormed out of the house, suitcase in hand, trying to ignore Doug's feeble protests behind me. How could he do this to me? To us? After everything we'd been through to finally be together, he was letting his insufferable ex-wife and her brat of a daughter walk all over our marriage. My friend Susan didn't even blink when I showed up on her doorstep, red-faced and furious. "Come in, honey," she said, wrapping me in a warm hug. "Want to tell me what that bastard did this time?" As I vented about Linda and Kristen's unannounced arrival, Susan's face grew thunderous. "The nerve of them, inviting themselves into your home like that. And Doug just rolled over as usual, I'm guessing?" Nodding miserably, I sank onto her plush sofa. "He claims it's just temporary, but you know how he is. Once they get their hooks in, they'll never leave." "Well, you're welcome to stay here as long as you need," Susan said firmly. "Lord knows I've had my fair share of unwanted house guests thanks to Carl's idiot family." I managed a watery smile, grateful for her steadfast friendship over the decades. While our husbands came and went, taking us for granted, Susan and I had been each other's constants. Over the next few days, I tried to make the best of my sudden displacement, but it wasn't easy. Everywhere I looked in Susan's cozy home, I was reminded of happier times. Photos of her and Carl on vacation, little mementos from her grandkids. My own dreams of a blissful new chapter with Doug, growing old together, seemed to be crumbling. "You know, I saw Doug at the grocery store yesterday," Susan mentioned one evening as we watched mindless TV. "He looked miserable." I snorted. "Yeah, well, he made his bed. Let him lie in it with the she-devils." "Don't you think you're being a tad harsh, dear?" She gave me a pointed look. "After all, you did marry the man." Bristling, I shot back. "And he married me, not them. We're supposed to be starting fresh, just the two of us. But no, he has to let his parasite family suck him dry as usual." Susan held up a placating hand. "I'm just playing devil's advocate here. You know I'm on your side. But maybe once you've both cooled off, you can have an actual conversation about boundaries?" I knew she was right, as much as it pained me to admit it. As infuriating as Doug could be, shutting him out completely wouldn't solve anything. I'd have to go back eventually and stand my ground. Little did I know, the war was only just beginning. Because when I did return home, I discovered just how far Linda and Kristen were willing to go to make my life a living hell. After a few days of licking my wounds at Susan's place, I knew I had to go back and face the music. As much as Doug had hurt me by letting Linda and Kristen invade our home, running away wouldn't solve anything. I was determined to stand my ground. I steeled myself as I pulled into the driveway, half expecting Linda to be waiting on the porch like a vulture. But the house was quiet, almost eerily so. Taking a deep breath, I unlocked the door and stepped inside. "Hello?" I called out tentatively. "Doug? It's me." No answer. Frowning, I wandered further into the living room. That's when I noticed it. My mother's antique locket lying haphazardly on the coffee table, the delicate chain tangled. A wave of fury washed over me as I snatched it up, cradling the precious heirloom in my palm. How dare they treat something so precious with such careless disrespect? The sound of giggling from the kitchen made me spin around. Kristen stood there, smirking at me over a glass of wine. "There you are," she said airily. "We were wondering when you'd be back to clean up after us." "I live here," I shot back, clutching the locket tightly. "Unlike you. Now where is your mother?" Kristen shrugged, taking another sip. "Out with Dad, doing whatever." "You know how they are." Of course I did. Linda had always been able to wrap Doug around her manicured finger, even after their divorce. I felt a pang of hurt that he was out gallivanting with her instead of at home with his new wife. "Well, while you're here as my unwanted guest," I said through gritted teeth, "I'll thank you not to touch my personal belongings, especially things that were my mother's." Kristen's eyes danced with cruel amusement. "What, this old thing?" She nodded at the locket. "I was just trying it on. No need to get your granny panties in a twist." My temper flared, but I refused to rise to her juvenile taunts. "It's not yours to borrow or try on or whatever. It's mine. Do you understand? My private property that you have no right to." "Geez, okay," Kristen rolled her eyes exaggeratedly. "I was just having some fun, but whatever. No need to bite my head off, step monster." The mocking jab stung, but I refused to show it. Clutching the locket protectively, I brushed past her toward the stairs. "That's right. Go pout in your room," she called after me. "Leave the fun to the real ladies of the house." I could hear her laughter echoing behind me as I hurried up to the bedroom, fighting back angry tears. This was my home, my sanctuary, and they were determined to make me feel like an outcast. As I gently laid the locket back in its usual place on my dresser, I could almost feel my mother's calming presence. She had been such a strong, dignified woman, always keeping her head held high even in the face of adversity. I needed to be more like her, I realized. To stop cowering and letting Linda and Kristen run roughshod over me with their cruelty. If Doug was too weak to stand up to them, then I would have to be the strong one, because this was my home, my rules, and if they refused to respect that, then they could get out. No more Mrs. Nice newlywed. From now on, they'd be dealing with a very different Mary Ann. After my confrontation with Kristen, I resolved to stop letting Linda and her daughter walk all over me. This was my home, my marriage, and if Doug wasn't going to stand up for me, then I would have to stand up for myself. The next morning, I marched into the kitchen to find Linda sipping coffee and reading the newspaper like she owned the place. "We need to talk," I said firmly. She looked up, one perfectly arched eyebrow raised. "Well, good morning to you too, dear." Refusing to be cowed by her condescending tone, I plowed ahead. "This living situation isn't working for me. You and Kristen have overstepped far too many boundaries." Linda set down her mug with an audible clink. "Excuse me? We're Doug's family. This is our home as much as yours." "No, it's not," I shot back. "It's my home that I share with my husband. You're just guests here, whether Doug wants to admit it or not." She laughed derisively. "Is that what he told you? Oh, Mary Ann, you really are a naive little thing, aren't you?" The belittling way she said my name made my blood boil, but I kept my temper in check. "I don't care what Doug has or hasn't said. This is between you and me now. If you two can't respect me and my home, then I want you out." For a moment, Linda looked almost impressed at my boldness. Then her expression hardened. "You don't have that authority here. This is still Doug's house, and he'll never kick us out, you mark my words." "We'll see about that," I said grimly. "I'm putting my foot down on this, Linda. The disrespect ends now." She rose from her chair, eyes glittering with malice. "Or what? You'll cry and pout until you get your way, like the spoiled brat you are." The insult stung, but I refused to rise to her taunts. Lifting my chin defiantly, I said, "I'm going to give Doug an ultimatum. It's them or me, and if he picks you again, then our marriage is over for good." A cruel smile curved Linda's red lips. "An ultimatum? How delightfully dramatic of you, but you're only digging your own grave, Mary Ann. Doug will never choose you over his family." "That's what you think," I said, turning on my heel. "But you're about to get a rude awakening." As I left the kitchen, I could hear her mocking laughter following me. But this time, It didn't make me want to cry. It only strengthened my resolve. Linda thought she had me all figured out, but she was wrong. Dead wrong. Because for the first time since meeting Doug, I was seeing the full truth. He was nothing but a weak, spineless man completely controlled by his manipulative ex-wife. And I was done being a doormat. When Doug came home that evening, I didn't give him a chance to take off his coat before laying into him. "We need to talk," I said, arms crossed. "This living situation with Linda and Kristen, it's over, as of today." He blinked owlishly at me. "Marianne, I know it's been hard having them here, but it's only temporary." "No," I cut him off. "It's not temporary, it's permanent unless I put a stop to it. They've invaded our home, our marriage, and you've just let it happen." Doug's face reddened. "Now hold on, they're my family, and I'm your wife," I shouted, finally letting my anger and hurt pour out. "Or at least, I'm supposed to be. How could you let them treat me this way, like some intruder in my own home?" He opened and closed his mouth, looking utterly befuddled, pathetic. "It's them or me, Doug," I said, lowering my voice to an icy calm. "You either put your foot down and get them out of here, or I'm leaving for good this time. No more second chances." For a long moment he simply gaped at me. Then, finally, "Marianne, you can't be serious." I felt something inside me harden at the weakness in his voice. This man who was supposed to be my partner would never put me first. Not really. "I've never been more serious in my life," I said quietly. "The choice is yours." As I turned and walked away, leaving him to make his decision, I realized this was about more than just winning a battle against Linda. This was about reclaiming my self-respect, my sense of self-worth that had been slowly chipped away. One way or another, I was done being a victim. Either Doug manned up and took my side, or I walked away from this toxic situation for good. The choice was his. But the power? That was all mine now. After giving Doug my ultimatum, I waited with bated breath to see what he would do. A big part of me didn't have much hope. He was so spineless when it came to Linda and Kristen, always putting their wants above my needs as his wife. But I had to try, one last time, to make him see reason. The next few days were tense, to say the least. Doug avoided me as much as possible, no doubt dreading having to actually make a difficult decision for once in his life. Meanwhile, Linda and Kristen swanned around the house, smug as can be, clearly thinking they had already won. I refused to be cowed, though. I started packing up my belongings just in case and making preparations to move out if needed. My friend Susan was ready with a spare room, and I knew my son Nathan would support me too. Finally, after nearly a week of agonizing silence, Doug approached me in the kitchen. His expression was pinched, miserable. "Marianne," he began heavily, "I've given this a lot of thought." I crossed my arms, tensing for the blow I feared was coming. "And?" he sighed, not quite meeting my eyes. I can't kick Linda and Kristen out. They're my family." White-hot fury lanced through me, but I kept my expression stony. "I'm your family now, too, in case you've forgotten. Your wife." I know. Doug ran a hand through his thinning hair. "But they have nowhere else to go. Linda's finances are, well, they're not great, Fry, and Kristen just got laid off from her job." Of course, the poor, helpless victims who always needed rescuing from dear old Dad. I felt disgusted, both with them and with Doug's transparent excuses. "So that's it, then?" I said, voice shaking despite my best efforts. "You're choosing them over me, over our marriage?" He flinched at the hurt in my tone. "Marianne, please, it's not that simple." "It is that simple," I exploded, finally losing my temper. "It's them or me, just like I said, and you've made your choice loud and clear." Doug opened his mouth, but I didn't let him get another word out. "Don't bother trying to explain or backpedal," I said, jabbing a finger at his chest. "I'm done being second fiddle to your parasite family. From now on, you can support them yourself since they're so helpless." His eyes went wide. What are you saying?" "I'm saying I'm leaving," I said, my voice hardening with resolve. For good this time. I should have listened to my instincts from the start instead of marrying someone so weak and spineless. Doug sputtered incoherently, but I brushed past him, heading for the stairs to finish packing. As I went, I caught a glimpse of Linda and Kristen hovering in the hallway, identical smug smiles on their faces. "Have fun with your new roommates," I tossed over my shoulder. "You've more than earned them." Kristen's grin only widened. "Don't let the door hit you on the way out, step monster." I didn't bother responding, just kept climbing the stairs with my head held high. I was finally free of their toxic web, no longer letting them manipulate and control me. As I packed up the last of my things, tucking my mother's locket safely away, I felt a strange sense of peace wash over me. This was the right decision, the only decision that preserved my self-respect. When I came back downstairs, suitcase in hand, Doug was waiting for me, with red-rimmed eyes. "Marianne, please," he said hoarsely. "Don't go. We can work this out." I shook my head, amazed at his deluded optimism even now. "It's too late for that, Doug. You made your choice." Then I brushed past him, out the door and into the brisk evening air, leaving my disastrous marriage behind without a second glance. As I climbed into my car, I caught sight of Nathan's number on my phone. A sad smile tugged at my lips as I hit call. It was time to go stay with my son for a while, regroup and plan my next move. This was a new beginning, as painful as it was, and for the first time in a long time, I felt free. After leaving Doug and that toxic situation behind, I felt equal parts liberated and adrift. On one hand, I was finally free of the manipulation and disrespect. But on the other, I was now 62 years old and essentially starting over from scratch. Thankfully, I had my son Nathan to lean on during those first few difficult weeks. He welcomed me into his humble apartment with open arms, no questions asked. "I'm just glad you finally saw the light about that idiot," he said bluntly as I unpacked my meager belongings. "Doug was a leech from the start." I managed a rueful smile. "You were right all along. I should have listened to you instead of letting his charm blind me." Nathan shrugged, wrapping an arm around my shoulders. "What's done is done, Mom. Now it's time to focus on you for once, instead of some deadbeat husband." His words resonated deeply. For most of my adult life, I had defined myself through the men in my world. First my late husband, then Doug. But who was I really, outside of being someone's wife? It was time to rediscover Marianne, the strong, resilient woman who had survived so much already. With Nathan's encouragement, I started looking for jobs to get back into editing, my former career before retirement. It felt wonderful to dust off those long-neglected skills, to lose myself in the familiar rhythm of fact-checking and line edits. Within a month, I had landed a few decent freelance gigs to bring in some income. It wasn't much, but it was mine, money I had earned completely independently of any man. "I'm proud of you, Mom," Nathan said simply when I shared the news. Those 4 words meant more to me than he could possibly know. Slowly but surely, I began rebuilding my sense of self-worth. No longer was I the woman who had been betrayed and belittled by her husband's family. I was a self-sufficient career woman, paying her own way and holding her head high. Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were days when the loneliness and heartbreak over my failed marriage threatened to overwhelm me. I missed having a true partner, someone to share my life with. But I refused to rebound recklessly, to repeat the same mistakes. I needed to be whole and happy on my own first, before even considering letting someone new into my life. In those darker moments, I would take out my mother's locket, the one Kristen had so carelessly tossed aside, and find strength in running my fingers over the tarnished gold links. This heirloom was a reminder that I came from a long line of resilient women who had endured and overcome their own struggles. If they could persevere, so could I. The months passed in a blur of work, time with Nathan, and the occasional social outing with my friend Susan. Slowly, steadily, the gaping wound of my divorce scabbed over and began to heal. Then, one sunny afternoon while I was editing in the local park, my phone rang. It was a number I didn't recognize, but I answered anyway. "Marianne, it's Doug." I stiffened at the sound of his voice, equal parts angry and caught off guard. Part of me wanted to immediately hang up, to sever that tie completely. But another part, a deeper part, knew I owed it to myself to hear him out one last time. To slam the door decisively instead of leaving it cracked open. "What do you want, Doug?" I asked evenly, proud of how steady I kept my voice. There was an audible exhale on the other end of the line, as if he'd been steeling himself for this conversation. "Marianne, I made a terrible mistake, the biggest mistake of my life. And I need you to know how sorry I am." I said nothing, simply listening as he plowed ahead. "Linda and Kristen, they took advantage of me in ways I didn't even realize at first. Financially, emotionally, you were right about them all along, and I let them completely ruin what we had because I was too weak to stand up to them." Doug's voice grew thicker with emotion, but I refused to let myself feel sorry for him. "Not yet. I don't expect you to forgive me, but I need you to know that I see the truth now, and I'm working on being a better, stronger man for me, not for anyone else. You deserved so much better than what I gave you, Marianne, and I hope someday you can find the happiness you deserve." The line went silent then. I could have responded, could have unleashed all the pent-up hurt and anger I'd been carrying around for months. But in that moment, I realized I didn't need to. Doug's words, his obvious regret, it was enough. Because for the first time since our marriage fell apart, I felt completely free of him. No anger, no sadness, no lingering doubts. Just peace. So instead of yelling or rehashing old wounds, I simply said, "Thank you for calling, Doug. I wish you the best." And then I hung up the phone, a small but serene smile on my face as I turned my attention back to my work. Another chapter was closed, making way for whatever came next. And this time, I had no doubts. The best was yet to come. A few months after Doug's apologetic phone call, I was settled into my new routine as a self-sufficient single woman. The editing jobs were keeping me busy, and the income, while modest, was enough to cover my humble apartment's rent. For the first time in years, I was standing on my own 2 feet financially. Nathan and I had grown even closer in the wake of my divorce, bonding over our mutual disdain for Doug's spinelessness. We made a point to have a mother-son dinner at least once a week to catch up. "You seem good, Mom. Really good," he said over plates of pasta one night, studying me with an appraising eye. "This independent life looks good on you," I smiled, warmed by his words. "I am good, Nathan. Better than I've been in a long time, if I'm being honest." He nodded approvingly. "That's what I like to hear. No deadweight ex-husbands dragging you down anymore." "Speaking of deadweights," I said slowly, "I actually got an interesting call from Doug last week." Nathan's easygoing expression clouded over. "Oh yeah? What did that weasel want?" Briefly, I recounted Doug's apology, his admission that Linda and Kristen had been using him financially, that he was trying to be a better man now, but understood if I could never forgive him. To my surprise, Nathan didn't immediately launch into a diatribe against his former stepfather. Instead, he was silent for a long moment, seemingly digesting it all. Finally, he said, "Well, isn't that a kick in the pants? The great Doug, brought low by his own selfish family." "I know," I said with a rueful chuckle, a real case of karma finally catching up with him. "So," Nathan fixed me with an intent look, "how did it feel, hearing him grovel like that?" I considered the question carefully. How had I felt in that moment, when the man who had betrayed and belittled me was reduced to begging for my forgiveness? Honestly, it felt empowering, I said slowly, like I was finally getting the apology and admission I deserved all along. But it didn't make me angry or bitter anymore, just at peace. Nathan's mouth curved into a small smile of approval. "Good. You're way too good for him, Mom. He's the one who should be haunted by what he threw away." His words resonated deeply, because in that moment, I realized that was exactly what this was. My long-awaited revenge against Doug and his wretched family. Not through shouting or cruelty, but simply by rising above it all with grace and dignity, by rebuilding my life into something stronger, by refusing to be a victim anymore. While Doug was left to grovel and drown in the consequences of his own poor choices, I was thriving. Embracing my independence, rediscovering my strength, surrounding myself with people who truly loved me. That was the ultimate revenge, not needing him at all anymore. Over the following weeks, I couldn't help but revel in my newfound freedom a little. I went out to dinners with Susan, took a weekend trip to the beach on a whim, and even reconnected with a few old friends from my college days. My life was full in a way it hadn't been in decades, unburdened by the toxicity of Doug and his family. And if the occasional rumor about their downward spiral reached my ears, well, I didn't deny the petty sense of satisfaction it brought. Apparently, without me as his meal ticket, Doug's finances had tanked spectacularly. Linda and Kristen were furious, of course, but their anger was meaningless to me now. They had made their greedy beds, and now they could lie in them. As for me, I had reclaimed my power, my self-worth, and I had no intentions of ever letting another person take that away from me again. When Susan asked one day if I had any regrets about the whole Doug situation, I didn't even have to think before answering. "Not a single one," I said with a serene smile. Leaving him was the best decision I ever made. And in that moment, I knew it was true. The woman I was now, confident, self-assured, in control of her own destiny, was worth all the heartache and struggle it took to get here. My rebirth, my renewal, my ultimate revenge, it was all worth it. Over a year had passed since I walked out on Doug and his toxic family, and my life had blossomed in ways I never could have imagined. The freelance editing jobs were keeping me comfortable, if not wealthy, and I had rekindled so many old friendships that had fallen by the wayside during my marriage. But easily the brightest spark in my newfound independence was an unexpected reconnection from my distant past. My high school sweetheart, Mark. We had dated all through those carefree teenage years before ultimately going our separate ways after graduation. Mark had joined the military while I headed off to college, and we had eventually lost touch amid the busyness of adulthood. Then, one sunny afternoon, I logged onto Facebook to see a friend request from a vaguely familiar name. Curious, I opened it to find a message from none other than Mark himself. "Mary Ann? It's me, Mark Patterson, your prom date from Westview High. I know it's been forever, but I was hoping we could catch up." I stared at the words on the screen, a wave of nostalgia crashing over me. Of course, how could I have forgotten those bright hazel eyes, that warm, crooked smile? We may have lost contact over the decades, but those memories came rushing back like they were yesterday. On a whim, I accepted the request and sent a message back, and just like that, we were off and running, trading stories about our lives, reminiscing about old times, and flirting with an easy familiarity despite all the years apart. A few weeks of messaging turned into exchanging phone numbers, which turned into hours-long conversations that kept me smiling like a love-struck teenager again. Mark had a way of making me feel cherished, valued, the way a good partner should. Finally, we made plans to meet up for coffee and catch up in person. I spent far too long fretting over what to wear before forcing myself to take a breath. This was Mark, the boy who had once loved me for my quirks, not in spite of them. When I saw him waiting at the cafe, hair more silver than blonde but eyes still bright with warmth, it was like no time had passed at all. We hugged, exchanged giddy "you haven't aged a day" compliments, and immediately fell into an easy rapport over steaming mugs. For hours we laughed and reminisced, picking up like we'd never been apart. I told him all about my disastrous marriage to Doug, the betrayal and heartache that had ultimately set me free, and he shared his own stories of loves lost and found over the years, including a painful divorce of his own. "I always wondered what happened to you, Mary Ann," he said at one point, covering my hand with his calloused palm. Part of me always hoped our paths would cross again someday. I felt a flutter in my chest at his tender words, at the open affection in his gaze. This was what true connection felt like. Honest, comfortable, cherished. Nothing like the manipulation and toxicity I'd endured with Doug. From that first meeting, Mark effortlessly wove himself back into my life like he had never left. We went on proper dates, dinners, movies, long walks through the park, reliving our youth. With each outing, I felt lighter and happier than I had in years. My friends and family adored Mark, charmed by his old-fashioned courtship and ability to make me smile so freely. Even cynical Nathan had to admit, he's a major upgrade from Doug, that's for sure. In Mark's company, I was able to completely shed the insecurities and doubts that my failed marriage had instilled. He valued me for who I was, respected the boundaries I set, and never once made me feel like a burden or afterthought. This was the real love I had been searching for all along, passionate yet stable, challenging but supportive, a true partnership of equals, built on years of history and hard-won wisdom. The first time Mark told me he loved me, I didn't hesitate before saying it back, because in my heart I knew this was the redemption I deserved after so much heartache. A love that filled my soul instead of diminishing it. Of course, I couldn't help but revel in the delicious irony that while Doug was left to grovel and flounder in the wake of his selfishness, I had reclaimed everything. My independence, my confidence, and ultimately, a love that made me deliriously happy. As Mark and I strode hand in hand through the sunshine one brilliant spring day, I caught a glimpse of my radiant smile reflected in a storefront window. In that moment, I made a silent vow to never let anyone tarnish my light again. This was my season, my rebirth, my renaissance, and I had no intentions of letting it or this profound love slip through my fingers.